From the Watergate building in Washington, this is Hotline TV. Now, here's Hotline editor, John Mercurio.
Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm John Mercurio.
And I'm Amy Walter.
We've had a recent spate of issues revolving around the issue of ethics resurging in on Capitol Hill among the Republican Party. We've had two congressmen over the past week, Congressman John Doolittle and Congressman Rick Renzi of Arizona, both having to acknowledge that they're under investigation from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Amy Walter, what's going on here in the House? Are we seeing a resurgence of this issue of ethics on Capitol Hill, and how are Republicans confronting it differently than they were last year?
The issue is that it really never went away. Remember, we talked early on in the last election about what Jack Abramoff and indictments and investigations defined the 2006 election. There was talk there were going to be 30 names, 40 names, right,
Sure.
embroiled in the Abramoff scandal. And in the end, we really saw it was Bob Ney and Tom DeLay were obviously the two biggest victims of it, but there weren't the big number of names. But what we did know underneath it all, when you talk to folks who had their sources in law enforcement, and we started to see some of it leak out, is there are a whole lot of people still under investigation. We haven't also brought up the fact that Jerry Lewis from California also under investigation, that Gary Miller in California also under investigation. There are other names, Ken Calvert, others, where it's pretty clear that there has been a policy set forth here by the FBI and Justice Department, et cetera, going in and saying, if it looks like there's any bit of impropriety, we're going to go in and start investigating.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean they're going to have an answer to it, but it does mean that this thing gets dragged out potentially for another couple of years, and so it's going to keep popping up. The problem is, for Republicans, number one, even though they're not in power anymore, it still reflects almost completely on them because it was from a time when they were in power.
Right, and the public still remembers that because,
Right.
of course, that ended up being one of the major issues that drove them out of power. So you still have a public perception of a link between the Republican Party on Capitol Hill and the issue of corruption. So the fact that that we're seeing people like Doolittle and Renzi facing these investigations, I think, just reinforces that.
Yeah, well,
What do you think? My question to you, I guess, is what do you think about the difference? Is there a difference so far that you've seen between the response from the Republican leadership on Capitol Hill last year and the way that they're responding this year? John Boehner,
right, saying,
and
okay, you
Tom
got to take
Cole,
off.
the chairman of the NRCC, saying, we heard the message, and this
and
is a
step
very
down from your
different-
committee.
Right.
Maybe, but I mean, I also think, and I recognize there are legal pieces to this, and you shouldn't. You are innocent until proven guilty, and
Right.
but the political reality of this too. And if I were Boehner and others, and pulling those folks aside, and saying, if this thing starts to get really ugly, it would be better for us if you were not running.
But since when? I agree with you.
And
but
it
since
won't
when?
happen.
It
And
won't happen. So
And
Bill
this is the
Jefferson
problem.
had
Exactly.
$90,000 in his freezer, and he is still sitting in Congress
exactly
because in his defense, he hasn't been
Indicted.
or
Nothing
anything
has
like that.
happened.
So why should
Exactly.
You're not going to see John Doolittle, a very, very ambitious member of the House, say, you know what, I'm going to fall on the sword
Because
for
it'll
the
be
Republican Party.
better for the Republican Party, right?
I mean,
unless it's made clear that this is coming down the pike, and if filing closes, and it's a couple weeks later that we find out that there is something more substantial, it's too late to do anything about it.
Interestingly enough, these are two districts that we're talking about, the Doolittle and the Renzi seats that you know very well. Both districts where Democrats did really well in 2006, and Chris Van Hollen, the chairman of the DCCC, already making the point that, look, we've already been focusing. Charlie Brown is already running against John Doolittle. We're going to have a good candidate.
Right. I mean, the
against
best
Rick
thing for
Renzi.
Democrats is actually to have those two still
Right,
there.
right.
And the best thing for Republicans for all of these seats, whether it's Lewis or Miller or Doolittle, is to have an open seat is a lot safer than
What did you
this.
think of Doolittle's response last week? The comparison between himself and the Duke rape, the men who were accused in the Duke rape scandal.
It's not
Much
usually
like
good.
It's not usually
Not
good.
usually
I
good to have
understand
all of those words in the same headline.
Indeed,
No,
indeed.
not at all.
And yet, of course, his point being that people are innocent until
Proven
found
guilty, yes, but you can use a lot of other examples
Right.
of that, and I don't know if that's the one.
Anyway, interesting. Thank you so much for the preview. Please join us next time on Hotline TV.